I am joined today by Mark James. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. The first customologist that we have had on the podcast. I might start by asking you, Mark, what does that mean?
Well, thank you, Emma, and it's a real privilege to spend some time with you today. Thank you for the opportunity. A customologist is one that believes that they can work with a brand to help create a customer for life. When we work with our brands that are looking to build a life cycle program, a customologist is one that sits down and says, okay, what would your business look like if we never ever lost a single customer? What would we do differently? How big would it be? What would we change? What behaviors would we look at? Of course, businesses, new customers come and go, but if we can help them keep and grow the ones they've got, it's a much more engaging and efficient way to, I guess, the cost of acquisition is very expensive. So keeping and growing customers a much more genuine and authentic and profitable way.
The title I've given this episode is What Your Customers Really Think. And we're going to be referring to a report that your organisation has recently put together, the Unspoken Customer Report, which I'll link in the notes, so people are welcome to go and download and see all the details for themselves. Do you want to maybe just give us a little bit of background as to, I guess, the research that went into the report and where the data comes from? And then I've got many questions because there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Okay. Well, Customology is a life cycle agency. We operate in Australia, but we've got customers across the globe, and we work with brands, as I said before, on helping build a life cycle program for their customers. Could be a loyalty program, but it could be a reminder program or some form of nurture. In this process of designing and developing and managing these type of programs, there are behaviors that in each business a customer might undertake. You know, they're doing more of this, less of that, or they want to do more of this and less of that. And we're always looking at ways that we're in giving good advice, trying to understand what the customer might be thinking or how they might be feeling is really important. In 2020, we embarked on a piece of research to go out and conduct an unbiased view of how a customer feels about how they might engage with a brand. And we used this originally not for public display. It was more for us to sanity check or sense check our hypothesis. And the information that came back, we interviewed then about 2,400 Australians. At the time, we worked with a university to sort of form up the type of questions that we wanted to ask. Because as you know, there's lots of different research out there. Some, that's pro-digital or pro above the line or pro-program or what it might be. We wanted something that was a little bit more speaking to them about their truth and their genuine engagement with brands and why they come back and why they leave and questions of that nature. When we completed this research, it confirmed in some areas what we were thinking, and it cast light on other areas that we hadn't considered. And as a result, that formed up an improvement in the way that we would give advice and counsel and perspective to the brands that we work with. Some of the brands we shared with this, they thought it was really good value. So we ended up writing a small narrative at the time called The Unspoken Customer and released it for free and gave it to the market, not so much as a stick, but probably as a bit of a sense check on what they were doing. And inside the report has hints and tips from a customologist. It was very well received, and we made a commitment, as this is part of our DNA, that we would continue this research. And we've just completed our second report, which was made available a few weeks ago. And you can download it. It's available there. And it's available for all sorts of brands. Anyone that wants to have a better relationship with their customers, certainly talking around the path to repurchase and how you might get them to come back again. This is what this report would help them at least sense check, or even consider what they may not be doing.
The one of the I guess kind of key points that comes out quite near the beginning is the issue of trust, and I think the report actually calls it a trust crisis. Can you talk to me a bit about that? I just thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, and it actually is a trust crisis in some respects, because I guess the disillusionment or the lack of confidence that customers were having with some of the brands that we did the research with, it doesn't. The obvious one would be, oh, they've got my data. What would they do with it? And certainly we asked questions around that. But some of the trust was due to the lack of authenticity. So I'll give you some example of that. So I think the numbers around 70% of the customer surveys didn't feel what the communication was coming from the brand was. They believed it, they trusted it. And the interesting thing about that would be that as a repeating customer, they felt better than a brand new customer. And as a result, that erodes trust. To have a good loyalty program, you've got to first trust the brand before you become loyal to them. And it's in that order, not the other. And the other one was an over communication about how the brand was doing, not necessarily about how the customer was doing. So one of the stats that came out was over 90% of customers said they didn't want another survey, another NPS check-in. While I know that's really important, and it should be done in concert, and I can certainly talk around some strategies on some of the advice we give in that area, there was an over communication. Some people are getting somewhere between 15 and 20 emails a week from some brands. They didn't get a survey, or they got a survey, they didn't fill out, they got in trouble then from the brand for not filling out the survey, and then they get in trouble for not responding to the idea that they should have filled out the survey. Yet the consumer in some cases hadn't even got the goods yet, hadn't even tried the product, but they want to know how they went. And so this blend between automation and I guess the humanization of the conversation they want to have with the customer is, I guess, a little askew. And as a result, that speaks directly to the trust and confidence with the brand. It's a little bit like try to buy tiles at full price. Or rugs at full price. They're always closing down. They're always end of year. This is the best, it's 110% off. There's always a deal. And so as a result, you train that behavior. And then when something is different to that, the customer goes, hang on, wait a minute, this isn't true. So that's really where the trust comes from. It's what they say versus what they do. In fact, there was a theme that also came out as a subset of the trust, is they said, well, you know my name, but you don't know my story. And as a result, it was easy to personalize, but they weren't connecting what the behavior was with the customer. So that sort of all is where the trust piece was certainly highlighted to us.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? That the line between personalization and I've had it happen to me a couple of times where borderline stalking, where it's become so personalized that they've, the brand certainly answered that first question of, yes, we understand the customer and we understand the purchase history, but then maybe they've crossed too far the other way. But interesting feedback in the survey that the majority of customers just feeling that, yeah, just because it says dear Emma, dear Mark at the top and then a completely generic email to follow, that's not personalization.
Correct.
How does, I guess, kind of really genuine and detailed kind of segmentation flow into that? Because presumably in order to make that more personalized, more authentic connection with the customer, there needs to be quite a significant degree of segmentation going on.
There is. Actually, our advice is somewhat to take a step back and have a look first. We storyboard out the journey that currently exists, and probably probably just to set this up a little bit is probably the thinking that we apply to that approach. So we want to be in a situation, there are only two reasons that you'd collect the customer data or have a program in relation to that. The first reason is you want to be in a position to continue a conversation, talk to the customer, not talk at the customer. And the second reason is to influence some sort of behavior. Yes, of course, getting them to come back again, because you've spent a lot of money on the acquisition side to find them and to get them through their gates or hoops or whatever it might be to get involved in your business. But then, so instead of, and segmentation is important, but think like a customer. How do you want, what sort of relationship do you want to have with them? So, for example, here's a call out stat. Circa 70% of customers who've given their data across are rarely or never ever thanked for purchasing from a brand. So while it's really important to get a survey, how do we go? What do we do? What about, let's put some highlight on how we recognize and thank someone and reward the behavior that we would kind of like. So should everyone be thanked? When should they be thanked? How do they thanked? And thank you is actually one of the most successful campaign series that we've ever worked on. And people go, well, that's obvious. Well, not really, because it's overlooked.
And say people don't do it, do they? So.
Right. And I think that's the point I'm trying to illustrate. How do we onboard a customer? How do we welcome them in? How do we follow up once they've had that engagement? And I'm being very broad in my commentary here because I want to respond to your question around segmentation. It's really about, while segmentation is important, it's not nearly as important of having a very solid nurture or journey. And then that should inform the segmentation a little ways, because we want to thank our customer. We want to remind them. We want to recognize them. And yes, we do want to help with referral. And we do want to help, create that type sort of that behavior. So what measures are you putting in place to track the behavior? And then only through the segmentation, you'll be able to see the measured against that type of behavior. So it's sort of, it is done in concert, but it's really about firstly drawing out the life cycle that you want to have with your customer. And we talked a lot about how do you get a customer to go from first transaction to second to third, and third to fourth. And in and around that, in that time there's some very subtle ways that you can nudge them. And I think it's a really important way. While you could get really deep with your data, you could find out what they drank or what they ate or what they bought. Customers actually aren't that complicated. They just want to be recognized and not stalked. And then they also want to, again, back to that trust piece. They've bought something a certain way or something from you. They don't want to know on Monday that you've just sent them an offer and that particular product they've bought is now discounted. So while segmentation is important, one of the real important parts about segmentation is suppression. And what type of conversation do you want to have with that audience? I think the most important piece of segmentation is dividing your budget into two parts. This is our acquisition budget and this is our retention budget, and they shouldn't meet. And then how would you spend and invest time and money on that particular part of your customer journey piece?
I noticed as well that was one of the things that came out very strongly. A lot of customers saying that they felt that there was always a deal for a new customer, but as a loyal customer, they perhaps didn't feel recognized in the same way. And I think it's probably quite easy for brands to fall into that trap, isn't it? Of always, as you said, always acquisition, new customer, which is quite expensive to do, whilst perhaps overlooking the potential goldmine that they have with their existing customers, and perhaps a retention journey or a repurchasing journey might actually be a better investment from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's if you're thinking about retail and taking to the effort of collecting their information and then putting yourself in a position where you want to communicate again with that customer. And let's say part of your strategy is that you want to be a heavy discounter. You're always going to have deals, you're going to have lowest prices. Then potentially, instead of communicating to that customer that you want them to behave slightly different, maybe you give them a preview first. So instead of saying, look, we're about to release these deals to the market, we wanted you to know about them first. And to make sure you've got heads up, you've got some advantage on that, make it feel special, make it feel inclusive. What you can't do is if you can't, and you can't get a customer to buy something on Tuesday and then it'd be radically discounted on the following Monday. And if you do have that type of disconnection between your business, maybe you have to do an offer where if you've seen this product before, then we're happy to offer you the difference in a credit to come back and spend in store again. And it could be as simple as that. But discounting is only one of the 5 ways that a customer deems value. So price isn't the only thing they consider. Unfortunately, it seems to be the easiest thing a brand will go to because they think we don't have the right price or we're not offering another voucher, another discount the customer might be. There are 5 other elements that a brand will consider, a customer will consider when choosing a brand.
Yeah, particularly I think in more sort of transactional retail businesses, it always seems to be the price-led conversation. I don't see, just in terms of, I guess, the brands that I communicate with and communicate with me, I don't see many of those brands having a different conversation. It does tend to be, we're on sale, we're this, we're that, or, you know, I don't know, buy 2 get 1, whatever. But yeah, very much that price-led conversation. What are the other, you said 5, what are the other factors?
Yeah, so if you think about functional value, you're really talking about quality and price. And the quality will have a decision-making factor in how a customer will choose. The price obviously is concerned. So if they can make a decision across the market that it's worth $100 and all of a sudden now it's $200, and then the rest of the market is somewhere between $100, and they go, well, what more am I getting for that? So quality will have, I guess, a factor in their decision making. The next 2 are really around this experiential sort of phase, and that's where people look at the I guess the delight of what it's like to deal with a brand, and then there's a secondary to that, the convenience of dealing with a brand. So let me talk a little bit about that. So convenience is, do they offer a pickup or do they offer delivery? Is there a seamless experience around the convenience? I live here, but how do I get access to that stock there? Can you bridge the gap? Can you make it easy? Is your locations where I can pop in and grab that? I guess, is it convenient for me? Can I order at 6 o'clock on a Sunday? Because that's when I do my shopping.
Yeah.
Can I buy it on behalf of my mother or my father who doesn't want to do this? And then there's the delight. So I've bought something, let's say the experience was online, and it's all but obvious it's a gift. Do you offer a service where you might wrap it for me? Could I have it delivered to a certain place that would make me feel like I could deliver it and surprise someone with that? Was it easy? I think that's one there. Do I have to fill out the same information over and over again? Is my onboarding or initial onboarding somewhat delightful? And easy is a delight. Hard certainly would be not a delight. And then it comes to, I guess, the next aspect of value, and that's around this social and is social belonging and social impact. So now it's not so much about saving the whales or protecting the trees. Let me talk about some of the things that we've noticed, certainly in the last 18 months, 2 years. Social belonging is, if I spend my dollars here, I want to belong to something. I want to belong to a movement or a brand that's connected to what's going on in the local markets. But the impact is, if I spend this money, will that help support a local job? Will I help support a local person? So big brands are a little bit on the nose. So the local coffee shop or the local retailer needs to consider telling more stories about that. While I'm part of a big brand, I employ people locally here from the local community. I support the local soccer team. I support the local there. So the 5 elements there, obviously price is just one of them. When you're thinking about your communication, how do you balance out all of that? It doesn't all have to be one way, but it definitely needs to be a consideration set. And social impact and social belonging are probably underused opportunities. And it doesn't need to be macro social issues, whether it be I guess some are more the political social agendas that are going on. Local and supporting community is a really high agenda for people. I've got money to spend. I can spend anywhere I like. If I could spend it local, I would. But am I making it convenient, and is my experience delightful? And is the value or the quality of my product represented in my price? So I think they're the sort of 5 elements. I hope that's not too long-winded, but
no, it's super interesting. Just as you were saying that, and I suspect the answer is that it's different in many cases. Is the customer kind of cycling through all 5 of those things at any one time and essentially ordering them for a particular purchase of what they feel is more important? So I don't know, maybe if it's, I'm going to buy a loaf of bread, maybe it's price, but if it's a takeaway coffee, maybe it's more important that I support my local shop. So are we all sort of cycling through those 5 and kind of ordering them differently depending?
I think so, but again, convenience is an interesting value prop, and some brands have had it too good for too long. I remember there was a time I was working with some people on a very large brand, and they said the market has grown up, but this brand hasn't. So these stories, while they might be soft and haven't probably been told very well. So to your point there, what would make me support the local bakery, then support the local, I guess how Woolworths or Coles at the moment have got these internal bakeries they've built. Why would I support that one there? Which story, what story is the bakery telling? And what they typically do then is they might lean into price versus not telling the story that they are a local bakery. So there's an education piece. And I think that is, marketing, I believe, is actually storytelling. And people want to know, and that where they support, they'll feel good about it. Of course, the price is important, and I'm not undermining that, but I think there's also a rationalization where people can still choose where they spend their dough in a majority set. And are they aware of that story, that content?
Absolutely. Good pun there. You got dough in there on the on the bakery.
Couldn't help myself. Sorry, do you pick that up? Oops.
Also very well timed, because our latest previous to this episode was actually about storytelling, and that was one of the things that very much came through. And I think also it's a really great way for perhaps smaller brands with less resources to compete in a more meaningful way, because they perhaps have access to more stories or more relatable stories, or have sometimes a much more human element at the core of a story, because they're a smaller brand, perhaps they're a founder-led business. You know, there's a lot more that they can kind of talk about, whereas they might not be able to compete on price with a bigger brand. If they can tell a story and bring in some of those other social, experiential, hopefully convenience as well, maybe they can compete with some of the bigger brands and kind of make some headway.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of consumers, I'm sure there's a group that do one big purchase a week, or some people do lots of little bites. Again, I actually believe there's an education and there's an opportunity here. I think that's what we called out in the report, that it's easy to lead into price. Because but it's not a fair comparison of the quality of the work that some brands are doing. But I also think they've got to take the time and have a look at, you know, what their purpose is and what their purpose-led statement is around their particular product or offering. And are they telling stories around convenience? Are they telling stories around the delight? Is the process to deal with them easy? Like, have they looked at that? We often say, become a customer of yourself. Would you buy it from yourself?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, you wouldn't, then I'd be changing that. And then in relation to the social impact and belonging, we've used aspects of that in the comms narrative, especially around bigger brands employing local people and local communities, making a difference in those environments. And it's resonated really well. So I'd probably sum this up by saying this is an endless task.
Yeah.
Okay. And customers now are in the strongest position they've ever been, even consumers. They're the same. That they're more digital now. They'll research something before they buy it. So why would they choose you over somebody else? What compelling reason are you offering? And it's not because I've been here for 44 years. It's because every dollar you spend in here supports Billy on how he puts his petrol in his car, and how and I think anyone could tell that story, but just few are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting as well on the point of delight, because I think sometimes when you say that, your brain goes to all these sort of big fanciful things that you would have to potentially do to delight a customer. But even just, I don't know, anecdotally, I can remember buying something online from a store, a smaller brand store, and it came with a handwritten note.
And
super
can I
simple.
tell you,
It was amazing. Yeah.
I live in Brisbane, and there's a bakery I go to, and they're no different to any other sort of bakery, I suppose, but they're not a franchise or brand. But when you come in and ask for your order, they'll ask for your name, and they'll write it on the, especially if you're ordering a coffee as part of it, and then they'll say, "Mark, your coffee is ready," and they don't give you an order number. They want a personal connection with you. Now, I don't know if it's obvious to them what they're doing, but they're personalizing everything.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to me. And for some reason, I find myself supporting them more often. And I don't really look at the price. I'm sure there's cheaper stuff we can get elsewhere, but in that particular strip mall there's 6 different places I can get a cup of coffee at, but I'll support them.
You always go there.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think back to, my name, but you don't know my story. I think where the research came out is how you want to recognize the customer when they decide to choose you. There might be a situation where, can I grab your mobile number, because I can let you know what we're spending time on next week, what we're releasing, that we want to let you know first before anyone else. Now, that might not suit in every situation, but if you can be in a position where you can collect some information and then use it for good in improving your relationship with your customer, I think that'd be a good place to start.
There was also some interesting findings around email and the, shall we say, propensity of brands to use email as their preferred channel, and I think also the frequency with which they're doing that, and maybe that's I don't know, digital marketing's brought many positive things with it, but that's potentially one of the downsides, that brands just feel that they can email you constantly with stuff which, as you said before, may not be particularly personalized and is just, you know, their offer of the day, it seems, in some instances. But there was some interesting commentary around remembering all channels and not just only defaulting to email, whether it was SMS or even, you know, direct mail, and some things that would potentially be seen as, you know, quote unquote, perhaps a bit old fashioned, but certainly still have a place.
Yeah. Look, email is a very important channel. But unfortunately, some brands have built their whole strategy around it. And as a result, the laws and also the even the technology, if I was just to call out people like Microsoft and Google, with the way that you can now manage your inboxes, getting rid of spam or unsolicited or even solicited into clutter, it's a really hard channel to work like it used to. People are celebrating open rates of 25 or 23%. Congratulations, 75% of you people don't want to talk to you. You know, I mean, let's keep an eye on the steak.
Yeah.
Easier. And it's cheap. So it's because it's cheap and bang, 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 I can send that. So it's typically overused and not used in concert. We're more focused on giving advice around the audience and then choosing the channel secondary, not because we have a channel, we must use it. And we've seen, like over the last couple of years, huge success in outbound calling. I'm not talking about telemarketing, but genuine calls to the customer on behalf of certain brands where it made sense, which is a channel they hadn't explored before. We've seen probably an overuse of SMS for marketing, where it's really good for reminders, but not great for marketing. Direct mail is a very interesting channel. It's actually becoming a little bit like the new black, because it actually can get into the letterbox, get onto the dining room table, around the dinner table, on the fridge. There's not another channel that can sort of do that, and has, I think the advice is around between 7 to 8 days linger time in the house. But again, not for every situation. But then there's a consideration around the life cycle of the customer. I mean, there's one particular brand that, you know, their buying cycle might be once every 14 months, but it's sending 5 emails a week to a customer.
Wow. Yeah.
So now, and that's automation run away. And while I'm not here to judge them, I think there needs to be a consideration. Just sending more doesn't mean you'll get more. And the danger about both SMS and email, certainly in Australia, is that once people opt out of that, that's it.
Yeah, you're done.
So DM is not bound by that. With outbound calling, yep, there's a do not call register. DM doesn't have that same restriction. So you want to be respectful of the channel, because the customers have a lot more power in that. So I guess the point back would be, I mean, if you went over to a friend's place for dinner and you had a nice meal, and then they sent you 12 texts and 4 emails saying, how did we go? You'd feel a bit weird about that.
Back to my stalking point, yeah.
Right. And having a first party data where you can communicate, I mean, you know, I think there's a tempered approach to that. I would even go to one step further, that not everybody needs to be surveyed. I mean, we got, apparently we surveyed too many people. It's about 2,500 Australians to get the result on that particular report. You know, which is 25 odd million people plus or minus in Australia, which is less than, obviously, a percent of a percent. Maybe consider, which some of the advice we do is not surveying everybody. Maybe they've got to have at least a survey once a year. and potentially not survey everybody every once after every purchase. So can I suggest that needs to be tempered too, because then that takes out one less touch point and gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more genuine. So life cycle with a customer is really important. And it's about, a conversation with the customer, talking to them, not at them. An email, it's a little easy, right?
Yeah.
Misused, well, the results are real. I mean, opt-outs are way on the increase. Open rates are on the decline. It's a tough channel if you abuse it.
Just going back to your point about outbound calling, and as you said there, it should be a conversation, not a talking at the customer, and perhaps that's why that channel works. What would be the nature of that conversation? Is it actually, I'm not going to assume, I'll ask. What would be the nature of that conversation?
Okay, so I mean, again, it's got to be fit for purpose. A really good example of that is some of the work we do, and people have set an appointment, and they didn't attend. So a follow-up call to say, we know you had an appointment here to visit us, check in with us. It's a service-based call. And is there a way that we could work in with your diary to make this next appointment work? So there's an example of an outbound call could be used. And we've seen that used in retail as well as in health and medical and whatnot. Because sometimes the customer's just, oh my God, I've got 18 different emails or 10 different things running around. I forgot that appointment. Oops. And someone will ring up and say, can you just make it easy for me? So that's the convenience play here.
Yeah.
And the delight was, thank you for making, because this was important to me. I wanted to make that happen. So that's an example. Another example of an outbound call might be, assuming we know who the customer is, so they've made a purchase. So instead of sending them a thank you note, maybe there's a percentage of your customers each week. And I mean, it doesn't need to be a lot, but you might receive, hi, I'm John, the manager at the store. I see you bought something the other day. Firstly, thanks very much for purchasing this. How did the product go? Like, we're really looking to understand. Oh, well, it went well, great. Is there anything we could do to make that better? If there is, let me know. But the purpose of the call is just to say thank you and make sure you're satisfied with what we've done. Bang.
Yeah.
You have to call everybody. Now, interesting, that will be so uncommon, right? There's one particular brand that does that really well, or they used to do it really well. I'm not a customer of them so much anymore, but if I filled out a bad survey, someone would ring me and say, hey, listen, really appreciate your feedback. We'd like to make this better. Is there anything you'd recommend? Well, I'm so glad you rang. Yeah, actually, this, and this. Now, interesting, there are some places you go, there's a particular hotel I can think of. We stayed in Brisbane for an event and the experience was terrible. I mean, it's allegedly a 6-star hotel. I'm not sure if the 6-star is really what they were. But anyway, I filled out and, the rooms were dirty. The keys didn't work. There was no rooms. There was a slew of things that didn't happen. So I just took the opportunity. They asked for a feedback card. I said, hey, these things were all challenges. I would recommend, looking at these things because our experience was poor. To date, no one has ever rung me back.
Amazing, isn't it? Why bother asking?
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why go to all this effort? So I think...
and also, sorry to interrupt, they've lost you for good, whereas they might actually have been able to bring you back if they'd have called and addressed it and maybe invited you back to stay to see how much better they could do.
Right. And sometimes, this is me coming out of my counselling experience, sometimes customers just want to be validated.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be, I think the term is, they're not all Karens, right?
No.
Right. They just want to be heard and validated. And this is what happened. You'll tell 10 people that story. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to tell the story today about that hotel, but I can tell you it was a hotel, and I can tell they never rung me. I can tell you the other story where something didn't go so good, and they did ring me, and as a result, they didn't really fix the issue, but they validated what was going on. So again, you can't call them all, but you don't need to call them all. You just need to have that as a channel.
Yeah.
It's not, your audience is not sitting there waiting for their next email. And I'm sure, according to the survey, 90% of us are certainly not waiting for the next survey. So, and if you are going to do a survey, now you've got, what would you do with it?
Yeah.
That's the other question, right? So you spend all this money and say, well, we've got really high NPS. Okay, awesome, fantastic. Now that you know that, how have you dealt with it? How did the customer feel different about it? Show me that nature. And it's somewhat left wanting. So the elements are all there, but the customer's real, they're human, they've got feelings. And I'm not talking about getting together and holding hands and singing songs. But what I am saying is you've got to be genuine, and that builds the trust, that builds the authenticity. And it talks then to that second box about, is it a delight and is it the convenience, and did that work well?
I think also, as you said, validating, but sometimes in that instance, just saying sorry, just saying,
we missed it.
We got this really wrong. I'm really sorry. We've messed up. That's not how it should be. It's not the standard we would expect to deliver. I'm sorry. What can we do? You know,
and there may be nothing, but the point is you've validated it. So I think your question was around outbound calling. It's not necessarily to make a sale. This is a relationship you're trying to have with the customer. I think people really misunderstand the R in CRM. I think it means something else. But it's really about the type of relationship. And you can do this actually on a macro level. You certainly can. You can get that done. But that's a decision about, this is your retention budget, not your acquisition budget, right? Because all the dough goes to acquisition, right? I hope I answered your question about the
No, you did. So yeah, really interesting. It's just as you said it, I couldn't quite picture what that would look like, but I think I was thinking of it in the wrong way. As soon as you sort of say, actually, it's a way of having a more of a detailed conversation. And actually, on the thank you point with the brand, I've never had a phone call to do that. I've had it once, a couple of times actually, by text message, and it was very well done. It was personalized. It was about a month later. Thanks for your purchase. Hope whatever it was, pair of trainers. Hope the trainers are going well. You know, let me know if you need anything else. And personalized with the person's name who had helped me. Was really, really well done. And that was years ago, and it still sticks in my mind. So I think on that delight one, sometimes it's, like I said, with the handwritten note, I think people assume that delight has to be something huge. You have to do something huge in order to get that. But sometimes it's actually as simple as saying thank you. So
yeah, and I think that's, we talk about a thing called the honeymoon period. So that happens between the just after and up to about, could be as much as 30 days off from on the transaction. And this honeymoon is where the customer is most likely to refer or provide feedback. And this is a really, really important time. Sometimes when we're engaged from a brand, they go, oh, we've got to work on our churn. We've got to work on our customers leaving us. And we find, because of the data science work we do, that long-term customers were formed from the habits set in the first 30 to 60, 90 days of a relationship with the customer, not 2 years later or a year later when they haven't purchased, and they'd say, oh, we haven't seen you in a while. We better write, I haven't seen you in a while email, which, by the way, is probably on the top 10 of things people that customers hate receiving from it, or update your details. There's another cracker.
Yeah.
You know,
no, thank you.
Really? And they still happen every day. I mean, and you wonder why there's a trust crisis. Anyway, inside this honeymoon period is where the real genuine recognition, remind and reward should happen. And we spend a lot of time there. If you're having to work on your churn strategy, it's a little bit like if you're in counseling with your partner, it's pretty much over if you're actually at that stage. So we're trying to avoid any counseling. We're trying to do the front, and it's having a relationship with a customer, to take the adage out of the relationship world. It's an emotional bank account. You've got to do your deposits and your withdrawals. So, you know, that happens inside that honeymoon period.
Super, super interesting. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking us through that. And yeah, certainly given me personally a lot to a lot to think about. And as I said at the start, I will put the link to the unspoken customer report in the notes. So if people would like to download that and get the extra details, they're very welcome to do so. But thank you. Appreciate the time.
Emma, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. I always love talking about customers and how they might think with people. And I wish you and your show all the and every success.
Thank you very much.